So welcome to JavaScript webinar. Today is the last webinar in this JavaScript webinar series. So today's topic is Comet, sometimes called the reverse Ajax. So these are the topics that we are going to cover. So we'll talk about Web 2.0 phenomenon, and we'll talk about Comet, and then we'll talk about some issues of Comet, both client side and server side, and then we will talk about what is called the BayU protocol and Comet D, which is implementation of BayU protocol, and then we'll talk about Comet D, client side JavaScript programming, both Dojo and jQuery, and then also server-side configuration. So a little bit of Web 2.0 phenomenon. So in Web 2.0, basically the websites, the popular websites are actually being made by the users, meaning the contents of those websites are actually generated by users. So we are talking about moving from information age to participation age. For example, the contents in eBay, Wikipedia, or YouTube, or Flickr, those Facebook, basically those websites, those the social media sites would not be existent without people participating. So what that means is that there has to be some more time-sensitive and collaborative participating tool. So examples like a chatting and multi-user gaming and auctioning and things like that. So as you will see later on, these are the types of applications that could take advantage of Comet. Now let's talk about asynchronous communication. So when Ajax was introduced many years ago, basically, we call it the first generation Ajax because it handles Ajax operation from the client side, meaning basically you as a browser, you as a user of the browser can actually continue to function while your browser communicate asynchronously to the server retrieving the data. So that actually covers the asynchronicity from the client side. However, what is missing was asynchronicity from the server. So what we want is whenever server has some data, we want the server to be able to send the data to all the clients asynchronously. Okay, so that is the asynchronicity from the server side, and that was missing in the first generation of asynchronous communication. So basically, by having this server-side asynchronicity communicating to the browsers or talking to their server, basically we can allow users to communicate and collaborate within the web better. Okay, so that's basically what Comet is all about. So Comet, sometimes called server-side push, because the server is pushing the data to the clients, and it's sometimes called the Ajax push and reverse Ajax because it's a reverse the direction from the server to the client. So applications in the participation age. So the applications can take advantage of this Comet, include like a distance learning. So whenever instructor, let's say, move a slide, then the new slide will be viewed by all the students. Okay, collaborative authoring. So whenever a person, an author, suppose if you actually collaboratively creating a book or something, whenever someone actually make a change, that change is going to be visible to all the participating authors. Auctions. If you think about eBay, basically, when you make a bid, you want to know whether somebody else actually made a higher bid or not. And one way to find that out was, you just kind of keep polling, meaning you just keep refreshing your page to see whether there has been any higher bid or not. So that is not really efficient. So what we want is that whenever there is a newer higher bid, you want to get the notification. Okay, so auction could be, in fact, another application of Comet. And again, the games, these days a lot of people are playing online games, right? So whenever somebody actually make a move, that move should be able to be viewed by all the participating gamers. And also chatting as well. So whenever somebody actually posts a message, instead of you polling the server to find out if there has been any new message, the server should be able to send that message to all the participating chatters. So these are all possible the applications that could take advantage of Comet. Okay, introduction to Comet. So it's actually providing server-side, server-mediated collaboration. So, again, suppose if you have many chatters, so whenever a client user one types something, the message will be that, the push through to all the clients, right? So introduction of Comet. So it actually provides what is called the responsive and low latency interaction for the web, and we'll see why that is the case. So Comet is basically programming technique that enables the servers to send data to the client without having to wait for the client to ask for it. Okay. So basically this is asynchronicity that I was talking about from the server side. So whenever server has something to send to his clients, he should be able to send it, okay, without the client asking for it. So it allows creation of highly responsive and event-driven applications because the client will be able to get the new data whenever there is in fact a new data posted on the server side. Okay, so instead of client polling, the server should be able to send the data whenever it comes to the server. Okay, so it keeps the client up to date with the data arriving and changing on the server without polling. Okay, so it provides lower latency. So we'll see why that is the case. You're using a picture in the next slide. But basically, the thing is that if you're doing a polling, depending on the polling interval. So if you're polling, let's say every 10 minutes, and then if something happens as soon as you finish your polling, then you're actually waiting maybe another 10 minutes to get that data, right? However, in Comet or Ajax push, basically whenever data is available on the server, the data will be pushed to the client. So there is no actual waiting time as far as the client is concerned. So basically the time that something happened on the server and the time that the client received that something is actually very low, it's very small, okay? It's because it's not dependent upon polling. And server network do not have to deal with frequent polling requests from clients to check the updates. As you will see in the following slide, basically if you're using polling from the client, network, the bandwidth, it is actually being wasted most of the time because the polling, if there is nothing to actually grab, I mean, if there is not any interesting data on the server, basically, the request and response of that polling is wasted. Okay. Okay, so this is actually an important slide. So this is the polling that we are talking about. Okay, so this is in fact the first generation Ajax. So browser asks for the data. Basically this is a polling. His browser is asking to the server, do you have any interesting data? Okay. And if server doesn't have anything, then it will just send the response, no, I don't. Okay. And then some point, server will have some interesting event or interesting data arriving. And that data will not be available to the client until the next time client requests, do you have any data for me? So the latency period in this case is this much. This is a latency period, okay, in this the polling scenario. Now, so these two, Ajax push and Ajax push, there are two different kinds of Ajax push, meaning there are two different kinds of Comet. One is called the long poll and the other one is called the streaming. So in this case, client asks for, the something. Now, the server, until it has something to send back to the client, it will not send back a response. So as soon as there is an interesting event on the server, then it will respond to the client. And client, so there is absolute, there is no latency period, right? As soon as the event or data is available on the server, the client will receive it. Okay, and then client again send another request. So until there is another interesting event, this request will not be responded by the server. Okay, so that is the long pole. Now, another type of Comet or Ajax push is a streaming. In this case, client send the request, and then the server will send back the data in multi-part series. So, whenever there is an event, it will send a response. It's a partial response. And then again, whenever there is an event, it will send a partial response. Okay, so these two, this long pole and streaming, both of them are called Comet. Okay, so let's actually talk about these things in a bit more detail. So this is what I explained. The pole, the client sends a request to a server every X seconds or every X minute or something like that. And the response is going to be empty if there is no data. Okay, so this is the reason I say in this case, many polls are in fact wasted, okay, because mostly the response is going to be saying, no, I don't have anything. Okay, the long poll, basically client sends a request to the server, and then server waits for an event to happen, and then when an event happens, that's the time it will send back the response to that request. Okay, so in this case, response is never empty. Okay, so there is no wasted network bandwidth, or there is no wasted request and response. Okay, and there is no there is no client side hack needed. Server behaves like a slow server. So this is the reason why long pole is in fact more popular Comet scheme than HTTP streaming, because in this long pole scheme, as far as a client is concerned, the server will actually hold the response until it has some interesting data to send back. But it's just, the server is behaving like a slow server. So there is nothing the client has to do, meaning there is no code change required on the client side. Okay, so Comet should be able to be used without any change on the client side. However, in the third streaming side, because the server is sending back the response in multi-part series, the client has to change its coding. Client code has to be changed to be able to accept multiple the responses. Okay, so in order to implement Comet, this long pole is much more popular scheme because again there is no change required on the client side. Okay, so these are the real-life examples where Comet is being used. Gmail, and Gtalk, Mevo, and in fact, a lot of applications out there actually taking advantage of Comet already. Okay, moving forward. Issues of supporting Comet. So you might want to ask, Comet was introduced about maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So you might want to ask, this sounds like a really great idea. So why it wasn't actually supported until 5 years ago? Okay, so that's something that we are going to take a look. So limitations, there are in fact both client-side limitations and server-side limitations that didn't allow this Comet scheme to work, okay, until again 5 years ago. Okay, now in most web browsers, so this is a client-side limitations, okay, for Comet. So most browsers, they have number of concurrent HTTP connections to a particular server, okay, between maybe 2 to 6. So initially, I think Firefox used to have 2 concurrent HTTP connections allowed to a particular server. Now it's actually, I think it's 6, okay. Now, the reason this limitation of number of concurrent HTTP connection is not a typical problem for typical non-Comet applications was because, whenever you are accessing a particular site from your browser, basically connection is created and quickly released, okay? So, one request and one response, it will just consume one connection and connection will be created and released right away. So this limitation was not a big problem. However, in Comet environment, remember in Comet environment, so if you again think about this picture, in Comet environment, let's think about this long pole. Once the client sends the request, the connection has to be alive. Okay, so if the server does not have anything to send back to the client in, let's say, 30 minutes, that means, for 30 minutes, the connection has to be alive. I mean, connection is being used. Okay, so in Comet environment, the number of let me actually move on to the slide that we are talking about. The number of connections is actually number of concurrent the connections is actually very important issue. Okay, because you cannot have more than, let's say, 2 to 6 concurrent connections, meaning you cannot have more than 2 to 6, let's say, the communications. Okay. So this is what I just talked about. So in Comet environment where connection has to be kept open for a long time, this causes a problem. Okay, because browser will not actually start another browser will not be able to actually serve another request until that existing connections are closed. Okay, so this is the limitation of browser side. Okay, so what is the solution? The solution is what is called the Bayou protocol, and the idea is that I like to be able to use one single HTTP connection but multiple communication to the server. Okay, so you are basically building multiple channels over a single HTTP connection, and that's basically a Bayou protocol. Okay, so Bayou protocol basically defines a protocol in which a client and server can communicate in multiple channels over a single HTTP connection. Okay. Okay, so that's the client-side limitations and how we solve that. Okay, now server-side limitation was a scalability. Okay, so before the NIO, which I'm going to talk about in the following slide, basically the one request is actually consuming one single thread, and each block, and then the until response is actually being returned to the client. That thread is actually being tied up. Okay, so you could not, a particular server could not actually handle more than maybe few hundred clients. Okay, so obviously that is actually a serious, let's say, challenge on the server side. Okay, so on the server side, now they are taking advantage of what is called NIO, non-blocking sockets, to avoid blocking a thread per connection. Okay, so whenever a thread is actually so when a particular thread is assigned to handle a request, and then until response is actually being sent to the client, that thread will be actually reused to serve another request. Okay, so it's basically a pool of threads will be able to handle multiple, a lot higher clients. So that's the way that we handle the limitation on the server side. And most of the servers, in fact, implement these things already, taking advantage of new NIO blocking sockets that are available from JDK 1.4. So now we actually solve both client-side and server-side problems. So that's the reason that Comet is now being actually quite popular. Okay. All right, so let's talk about Bayou protocol and Comet D. So what is Bayou protocol? So it supports multiple channels over a single HTTP connection, as I mentioned before. So it solved the HTTP connection limit on the browser problem. Okay, so 2 to 6 concurrent HTTP connection limit problem is now solved using Bayou protocol. And each of those channels is representing a separate conversation. Now each channel will have a unique name. Okay, so this is the way that which channel. So whenever there is some communication, that communication should actually specify the name of the channel, and the channel name is something like this, /my and channel name. So this is the format that you could use. And if you want to actually refer to all channels under my, then you can actually use a wildcard as well. Bayou protocol is also based on what is called the publish and subscribe model. So you are going to subscribe a channel to receive a message. Okay, so suppose if you're building a chatting application, basically what you're going to do is you're going to subscribe that channel. Okay, the channel maybe would say my slash the chatter, chatter or something like that, and anybody who subscribed the channel will receive a message. Okay, now you're going to publish a message on the channel, and that message will be in fact delivered to every subscriber that subscribed the channel. Okay, so this is actually publish and subscribe model. So message router on the server basically routes the message to anybody who subscribed the channel. So whenever there is a message published on the channel, any subscriber will receive the message. So in that case, the server functions a message router. It receives the message and it will actually figures out who are the subscribers, and then it will send the message to all those subscribers. Okay? Again, using that long pole. Okay? So in a sense, this is actually providing client-to-client communication to the server. So again, if you're building auction applications or chatting applications, basically you're talking about chatters or participants in an auction to communicate through this server. So, okay, so that's Bayou protocol. Now, what is Comet D? Comet D is implementation of Bayou protocol from Dojo Foundation. And it comes with both client and server side implementation. So in client side, it provides a JavaScript implementations and also Java implementations that implement Bayou protocol. And for JavaScript implementation, it does support both Dojo Toolkit and jQuery. So those are two major JavaScript libraries that it does support. And again, server is basically providing a servlet that functions as a web application that receives a message and then route those messages to anybody who subscribes a particular channel. Now, the server-side implementation, again, that's typically a servlet, and that has been typically platform-specific servlet. So Tomcat has its own servlet, and Glassfish has its own servlet. And so the server specific implementation is actually provided in the past. Now it's being standardized. And Comet D project also provides a servlet that should actually work on pretty much all the servers. And there are other Bayou protocol implementations. So these are examples. So Comet D is not the only implementation of Bayou protocol. Now, transport. So Bayou protocol specifies two mandatory transport, meaning these two transports are supposed to be supported by all Bayou protocol implementations, okay, such as Comet D. One is long polling and the other one is a callback polling. And long polling is something that we talked about, and it's the default transport, okay? And it's used when communication with the Bayou server, Bayou server happens in the same domain. Now it's actually supporting cross-domain as well. Okay, so in this case, again, data is sent to the server by means of POST request with the HTTP the Ajax call. Okay, and callback polling is actually to support the cross-domain access, and again inside is using JSON-P, which we talked about yesterday, or the day before yesterday. All right, so in Bayou protocol, it has what is called the meta channels and data channels. So meta channels are actually it's a system level communication, okay, while data channel is for applications to send the data back and forth. So these meta channels are reserved for communicating with event router itself for, setting up the connection and destroying the connection and reconnection and things like that. So these meta channels are system level, the communication, okay? So these meta channels could have, it could be handshake, meta handshake. These are all names of the channels. So handshake, connect, subscribe, and unsubscribe, and disconnect. So as the name actually reflects, these are the channels that represent how the channel is going to be in fact constructed and destroyed, and how channel could be actually used for publish and the subscribe. Okay. Okay, so this is, by the way, every message that is being transported between client and server over the BAU protocol is in the form of JSON. So if you actually capture the message, it will have, in fact, this JSON format of data. So this is the name of the channel. This is the name of the channel. This, so the channel and the name of the channel, client ID, and the data. Okay. So it's JSON data format. So this is handshaking. So before you start any communication, you have to actually start the handshaking. Handshaking is creating a communication channel with the server. So here, this is the client side. It's sending a handshake request message. So basically what it's saying is that, I'm actually trying to communicate with the server through this handshake channel. And the connection, supported connection type I can handle is long polling and callback polling. So it's basically client sending to the server, indicating what client can handle. So it can handle long polling and callback polling. And then this is a response message from the server. Okay. So again, it says, oh, I can handle long polling and callback polling as well. And this is what, by the way, this is your ID. Okay, so the first time a particular client is talking to a server, the client will actually receive a client ID from the server. Okay, and it does have reconnect and timeout and things like that as well from the server. So handshaking has to happen the first, and then connect has to happen next. Okay, so connect is basically indicating from the client, okay, I'm client ID this, which this is the ID that you gave to me. And now I'm going to use long polling. Okay. And then the server says, okay, so this is the client ID and I'll actually accept it. Okay. So now we should be able to do long polling. Okay. Carlos, you have a question? You say just hello. Everybody can hear me okay, right? All right, good, excellent. All right, so after handshaking, you do connect, and then you're going to subscribe and publish. Okay, so this is the way that you are going to subscribe. So I'm saying I'm going to subscribe, and this is the channel that I'm subscribing. Okay, so chat demo, this is the channel that I'm subscribing. Okay, so anytime somebody publish a message on this chat demo channel, data channel, I will be able to receive a message. Okay. And then this is the response message from the server, basically indicating, okay, your subscribe request has been successful. And this is the data, how you can actually send the data. So basically, this is the channel that I'm sending this data. Okay, and then there is a response message from the server. This is the response message that contains its own data. Okay. Okay, so so those are the protocols. This is what actually gets transported over the wire. So these are just transport. You're not constructing these things yourself. Instead, you're going to use an API to actually have this kind of protocol to be to be implemented. Okay, so Comet provides, as I said before, JavaScript library as well as Java library. We're going to actually focus on JavaScript library here, okay, because this is a JavaScript course. Okay, so Comet provide this JavaScript programming API, which actually reflects, something that we just talked about: handshake, subscription, publish, and disconnect. It also actually have the configuration and message batching. And the information about these programming APIs are actually documented in this website. Okay, so Comet website. Okay, so you can actually go to, for example, like a subscription. Then it gives you detailed information of how things work. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a brief introduction of each of these programming APIs. So configuration basically is done by this org.comet.d object. So on Dojo, the way that you can get this Comet object is by using dojo.x comet and jQuery JavaScript library that is reflected with this $.comet. Okay. All right, now this default Comet D object has been instantiated and configured with the default values, but it has not started any communication yet. Okay. Now, in order to start the communication, now when you actually configure, you have to specify what is the server URL. So this is the way you can do either this or this. Okay, so basically, I'm configuring the Comet D communication, and this is the URL. This is the server I'm actually trying to talk to. So this is a configuration, the first thing you have to do. And then you're going to do handshaking. So inside this handshake, basically that handshake communication protocol will happen. So remember that handshake exchange message? All right, so when you call that handshake method, okay, this message will be exchanged over this, the meta channels. Okay, it's going to, okay, so you just say, this is a Comet D object, and then you say handshake. Okay. So basically, again, in handshake, the client and server will exchange messages indicating what, let's say, transport protocol they want to use for exchanging data. This is a subscription. So Comet D has two APIs to work on channel subscriptions. One is what is called the add listener, and the other one is just subscribe. Add listener is for listen to meta channel messages, and subscribe is used for listening data channels, normal channel messages. Okay, and the way that you can subscribe using add listener is basically you call add listener method, and you provide the meta channel name. Okay, and this one is how you can subscribe normal, meaning data channel message. Okay, so I subscribe, this full bar is the data channel that I'm subscribing. Okay, and you can also unsubscribe it. So this is unsubscribe, and then you are actually removing remove listener. And publish. So suppose I want to actually publish a message, then I'm gonna use publish method of Comet D object. And again, this is my data channel, and this is the data that I'm actually publishing. So anybody who subscribes this channel will receive this data. Okay. Disconnect is just disconnecting the channel with the server. Message batching is when the client has to, wants to send the messages to multiple channels, you can actually batch it. Okay, so you are actually publishing 3 different channels in a single call. Okay, so you can do either this or this. Okay, so it's basically batching the communication. Okay, the server-side Comet is basically, it's a servlet. Okay, so because it's a servlet, you are going to configure the servlet in your web.xml file, just like any other servlet. So this is the servlet that is actually provided by Comet D project. Okay, and so you should be able to run this servlet on any, let's say, the servlet container like a Tomcat or a Jetty and a Glassfish and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to actually give a demonstration. By the way, unfortunately, I have not actually created the lab documentation yet for lack of time. So I'm going to just give a demonstration, and then I'll document this one in the lab document maybe within the next few days. Okay, so these are the sample applications from Comet D project. So if you in fact go to the Comet D project website, okay, so if you go to cometd.org website, you should be able to download you can download this one. Okay, and then it contains the sample application. So let me actually show you where I download it. So I'm going to just say download. So this is the latest Comet D project. So I unzip it. So I'm going to just Comet D. And here, Comet D demo. So it comes with this Comet D demo, which contains both client-side and server-side code. And the client-side code, it has a jQuery implementation and Dojo implementation. Okay, so this is the Maven project. So you can just kind of run it on any server of your choice. Okay, so I'm actually import that project and I just run it. Okay, so I'm gonna just run that code. Yeah, so this is the sample application. So as you can see, it does come with a Dojo implementation and jQuery implementation. So let me try Dojo implementation. So this is a chatting application. Okay, so I'm gonna actually start the one user. So let's say Sang Shin, and I join the chatting. Okay, so the Sang Shin has joined, and now let's assume I have another client. I'm actually using a single machine. Okay, but let's assume this user is actually 3,000 miles away talking to this Comet server. Okay, so I'm going to start the session for this client. Okay, so we now have two clients, and I could have another client. I could have as many clients I want. Now I'm gonna actually join. So I'm assuming I'm a user 2. Okay, and I join. Okay, so now user 2 has joined, and you can see the user now has a message. User 2 has joined. Okay, now anytime somebody actually posts a message, so this is my message 1, and if I send, basically that message should be sent to all the participating chatters. Okay, so this is basically reflecting what is happening using Comet. Now let's actually take a look at the communication. So I'm gonna just press F12. So yeah, actually, I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna use the a bit simpler example to show the exchange of messages from the client, and you can actually see that the Bayou protocol messages. Okay, so this is a chatting message. Okay, and so this is the case that So I'm gonna actually go to. So this is the case that I'm using Dojo, but you can actually do the same thing for jQuery. So this is using jQuery APIs, and this is using Dojo APIs. Okay. Now I'm gonna actually Comet D project also actually have a Maven archetype, so you can actually create a very simple Comet application. So I created both Dojo Comet simple application and jQuery simple application. So I'm gonna actually run this application. This is basically very simple Comet application, just talking to the server, and then it's just indicating that it actually start the handshake, make a connection, and then it send a message to the server, and server responds back with the hello world, and it just to say the Comet connection is established. Okay, so let's take a look at why F2 is not okay. Here we go. Oh, not this one. And I'm gonna just refresh this one. Okay, now let's take a look at the message exchange. So this is a connect. So you can see this is a handshake, right? So if I see if I see the handshake message, the request message contains this payload in the post message. So you can see I'm actually this is a subscribe. Okay, so I'm subscribing it. Okay. And then this is the response. So this is the response from the server. So you can see this is ID 3 subscription, blah, 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 and things like that. Okay. And the data is this. Okay. All right. So, you can see, I mean, those are the Bayou protocol level message exchanges between the client and server. Okay. So now if I take a look at the code, so let's take a look at the code. So this is basically the code that is being executed. Oops. Okay, so I got the Comet D object. So this is a Comet D object. Oh, this is the yeah, I'm looking at the jQuery version of it. Okay, so I want to actually see the Dojo version first, and then we'll take a look at the jQuery version. So this is the Dojo version. Okay, so it requires Dojo x.cometd package, and then we say dojo.add on load, and then we call function. So when the page is loaded, this gets executed. Okay, so basically it gets an access to cometd object. Okay, and these are the function definitions. Basically, it just displays this message. Okay, and then we also actually define a function object. Okay, and we also define the meta handshake. Okay, all right. So now, and this is actually when on load, I want to actually disconnect. Okay, and so what is actually happening is this. Okay, so we create the Comet URL. Okay, and then we configure. Okay, so we are configuring communication with the server. So this is the URL to the server. Log level is debug, right? So this is something that we have to do first. Okay, and then we subscribe by using add listener. So these are the handshake. Okay, handshake and connect. Okay, and then we start the handshake. So when we call the handshake, that handshake method is oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a handshake method. The method from the Comet itself. So when handshake is actually started, basically, these handshake and connect. These are the listeners, and then it will actually call this the handshake and connect the functions. So basically, this handshake, when the handshake is successful, this function will be invoked. Okay. So here we're actually doing a batch. So we actually subscribe and we publish. So we are basically subscriber as well as a publisher. So we subscribe this channel, hello, and then this guy is actually publishing to the same channel as well. Basically saying hello. Okay. So so when that subscribe is, so when somebody actually publish it, this function call gets invoked. Okay. So that's the reason. It's just say this message is going to be displayed. The server says. And this is the message data greeting, and this is the message that is received, okay, from the server. Okay, so that is basically what gets displayed. Hello world. Okay, and the client side, the jQuery code is pretty much the same. Okay, so this is the jQuery code, and again, here we get the Comet object from jQuery global the scope. And again, we are document ready, and then these are exactly the same code that we have seen, right? And the rest of the code is actually, again, exactly the same. Okay? So the only difference is basically getting this Comet object. Okay? All right, so that is pretty much what I have. So let me